everybody, and welcome to episode 6 of the Vegan Alliance podcast. Hope everyone had a good Christmas and survived the mountains of animals on the family Christmas tables. Today I've got my good friend over from California today. His name's Jona Weinhofen. Welcome, Jona.
Hello.
And yeah, I thought we'd just get straight into it today. If you wanted to tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe for people who don't know you, what's your background?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm not actually from California. I'm from Adelaide, so it's nice to be home. But I have been living in California for a couple of years now. But I've predominantly played music professionally over the last 10 or 15 years. I started in my late teens in a band called I Killed the Prom Queen from Adelaide and toured around Australia and parts of the US, UK, Japan, Europe with them up until about 2007. And then we decided to take a break and I joined a California metalcore band called Bleeding Through for 2 years. Again, toured the world with them. In 2009, I joined a British band called Bring Me the Horizon, who have been pretty big, definitely very big lately. And I was with them for 3 years until 2012 when I rejoined I Killed the Prom Queen again and have basically just been touring and playing music and fighting the vegan fight since then.
That's great. And when and why did you go vegan?
So I got into veganism through music, I think like yourself and probably like a lot of our friends.
Probably through a lot of the same similar bands.
Yeah, actually. So I first got into hardcore and punk rock and a little bit of metal when I was in my sort of early teens in high school. And I was listening to a lot of these bands that kind of weren't very accessible. And then I started to find out that there were these local hardcore shows that, you know, all these cool local punk and hardcore bands were playing at. And so I ventured out to my first ever show when I was 16 at the Adelaide Community Centre. I can't remember exactly who was playing that first show, but the second show I ever went to was a band.
And this would have been like late 90s, do you think? Or early
This
2000s?
was 98, I think, or 99. It would have been 99,
a long
actually.
time ago.
Early 1999, yep. And around this time, I had two buddies in high school, one of whom I played in I Killed the Prom Queen for a long time, JJ Peters, and another, a guy called Lyndon Reynolds, who was the drummer of my kind of old high school band. And they were both vegetarian and both, incidentally, had been raised vegetarian since birth.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
so I kind of became mates with these guys, and I was like, vegetarian, that's kind of weird. Like,
Had you ever thought about it before?
not really, not ever before. You know, I was 16 and these guys were talking about why their mums raised them vegetarian and how they felt completely normal. And I was like, that sounds kind of cool. I might give that a shot. So I went vegetarian around that time, sort of 99, started going to these shows, and then I was at the shows and the bands like Day of Contempt and Three Chain Break and a bunch of other local Adelaide bands were kind of playing, and I thought they were really cool, and I noticed a lot of them wearing vegan merch and merch from other bands that were like vegan and straight edge. And then at the shows there were people selling like veggie dogs and homemade cupcakes and stuff like that. And everything was vegan. I was like, wow, okay, so what's the difference between vegan and vegetarian? I started kind of figuring this stuff out on my own and talking to the guys in the bands. And Luke, you were actually the drummer of Day of Contempt at the time. And I remember meeting you and Ben, the singer, for the first time. And you were these like cool vegan musician guys. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. I need to be more like these guys. And so, yeah, I remember at school in like grade 11 and 12, I was like in my breaks, I was on the internet Googling like stuff about veganism and animal rights and animal cruelty, and it wasn't that much later that I decided that I couldn't just be vegetarian and I wanted to take the full step and become a vegan.
And it's pretty much like, yeah, similar story to me. It's like I explained before on previous episodes is how I got into bands like Earth Crisis, who, when you're a young sort of teenager who's, you know, influenced by things around you or things that you're into at the time, is you see these kind of guys up on stage, like, you know, they kind of look cool and like, yeah, they're not just singing about nothing, like they're singing about something, and you just kind of want to, you know, I just want to be like them. They you know, you might think a vegetarian or someone who doesn't drink is kind of a dork, but then when you see these guys, you're kind of like, oh wow, they're actually kind of like awesome, and I want to be like that. And it's such a positive thing for young people to sort of be influenced by.
Yeah, totally. Like I was already veg around that time, and I'd never drank or done drugs or anything. And so to see these guys in cool bands up there that were similar to me as role models, I was like, this is cool. Like, they're not your usual like rock star, getting drunk, smashing hotel rooms,
They're
kind of
actually
rock star.
talking about stuff.
And I really identified with that, and I think that's part of what led me to want to not only play music professionally because I was so passionate about music, but to kind of continue to live that like positive lifestyle and spread that through my own success.
So you would say your reasons for going vegan from the beginning were ethical reasons?
Yeah, totally. I didn't know anything about the health related issues to do with veganism or eating animal products. Really, I knew very little, and the environmental thing kind of wasn't really touched on as much back then. And so I just remember talking to these guys in bands saying, like, this horrible stuff happens to animals behind the scenes, and we don't want to support that. We want to boycott that, and that's why we're vegan. And that was my first reason for going vegan. And then the more the years went on, the more I learned, always learning, always, researching, talking to other people. That's when I realized there were kind of other really cool benefits to the lifestyle as well.
Yeah, I think it's the same for a lot of people. They either get into it for ethical reasons or health reasons, or, like someone says, I'll try out this diet because I hope you lose weight. I mean, whatever way you get into it is great. It's just in the long term, once you can identify with the ethical reasons behind going vegan, I think that sort of makes it a lot easier, because you're just like, you can't contribute to it anymore because it's not just about you.
That's right.
So yeah, I think you've been vegan a long time now, like myself, and like there's been a big change in veganism in that time, and I think not just the food, but just the sort of the awareness. Like, people know what the word is now. Like, you can actually go somewhere and say, "Can I get this vegan?" And most people tend to know what you're saying. But what I wanted to ask is, what is the main difference you think between being vegan when you first went vegan and being vegan now? Like, what is it for you that's like what are the things you're noticing?
Well, just as a person in general, and also as a traveling musician, I've noticed a huge difference between sort of the early 2000s and right now, in present time. Accessibility of products, accessibility of information, like accessibility to other like-minded individuals as well. The population of people who identify as vegan or vegetarian has grown so much recently. Even in the last couple of years, I think I read somewhere that between 2009 and now, that the vegan population in the US has increased from like 3 million to 16 million people.
Wow, that's huge. Jump. What's that? Was it 2016? 7 years.
Yeah. So, with a rise in popularity of a lifestyle and a movement, there's going to become more accessibility to various,
because there's more demand,
things to do with it. Right. We're creating demand. And so, when I used to get on in the tour van back in the early 2000s and we'd tour around Australia, you'd struggle to find a block of tofu and a veggie dog in the supermarket.
You'd have to stock up before you left, or make your own stuff.
Yeah, that's it. And nowadays, especially like all the capital cities in Australia, most of Europe, especially throughout Germany and the UK, and all across the US, you can find awesome vegan food products, and a lot of kind of like fast food restaurants and just general restaurants will have really good vegan options on their menu nowadays, and identify those on the menu rather than you just having to scour through and be like, oh, there's a salad, maybe I can get the cheese taken off.
Yeah, I noticed that actually at my brother works at a pub down south, and they don't really have anything specifically vegan on the menu, but like anything that is vegan, they it's weird, they don't really like make a vegan dish as such, but if something happens to be vegan, it actually says vegan friendly on it, which is really weird I found for a pub to be using terms like that, because pubs generally don't attract that kind of, like, they're not really interested in sort of accommodating.
I think any business that's smart is gonna realize that it's a thing that's gaining traction and gaining a lot of popularity, and the more and more the time goes on, like more and more people are deciding to live this ethical, cruelty-free lifestyle, and so they've got to adapt and change for that. Otherwise, certain people may boycott their business. So I would say to anyone listening to this as well that is vegetarian or thinking about switching to a vegetarian or a vegan diet, like, from me to you, it's really cool. Coming into 2017, it's so cool that there are so many options for everyone out there. like all across the world, restaurants, supermarkets, 7-Elevens, everything like that.
Well, we were just talking about a cosmetics brand that's like going to turn all their stuff vegan. Like people just know there's a market for it, and they know that if they label everything as vegan and make everything vegan, that if they've got good products, everyone will buy them whether they're vegan or not, and it opens up their market because vegans aren't going to boycott them anymore, but vegans are going to start buying their products.
That's right.
And I think there's definitely it's probably never been easier to be a vegan as it is right now. I mean, it's super easy. Like everyone says, even if you don't have that much money, there's always cheap vegan options. But if you work a regular job and just afford to do a regular grocery shop, you can pretty much buy anything you like that's a meat or animal based item. You can get the replacement for somewhere in your city. I'm sure of it. So, have you ever had many, like you touched on it briefly just then, but any struggles being vegan on the road? Like, obviously you've traveled a lot. So was there any places where you found it like super difficult to be vegan or?
Yeah, and for different reasons too. So, my second band I played for, Bleeding Through, I was the only vegan. There was one other band member that was vegetarian, and our tour manager was vegetarian too. So that was great. But in that band, and like, don't get me wrong, all amazing people, but we found ourselves a lot of the time in the predicament of having to stop for food, and you didn't want to stop at 5 different places, and you're out in the middle of nowhere, the options aren't that great, so we'd just basically stop at whatever suited the majority. So I guess in my time in Bleeding Through, we stopped at a lot of places in America like Taco Bell and Waffle House and IHOP and all these.
So you're scraping the bottom of the barrel to get something vegan.
Yeah, so it got a bit boring at times. It was, my options were often just a salad or a side of chips or something like that.
So you had to be prepared. I think that's the main thing about being vegan is, I've toured a lot as well, and people always kind of make fun of you because you're like, oh, look at the vegan guy with his groceries. But like, if you just, I think snacks. Coming from the era we went vegan is you just get used to packing your little grocery bag, storing it all in your fridge or your esky or whatever you've got on hand, and always like making sure you've got enough food.
Yeah, so that's it. That was the only like kind of difficult part I found, and that's going to be the same in like a lot of social situations too. Like, you're in a big group of friends, you're the only vegan, they all want to go eat somewhere that's not very vegan friendly, and you kind of just have to fend for yourself. And that's just part of going along with having friends and family and loved ones that don't share exactly the same ideals as you, and we deal with that as best we can. I think as far as my other experiences, I guess, as I said earlier, like throughout the last 5 or 10 years, it's been really good in most places, like all through Europe. There's lots. It's really easy to find at least like a little health food store or a great website that every vegan and vegetarian should know about is called happycow.org, and they have an iPhone app as well and an Android app.
And it's all free, right?
It's all free, and you basically just type in your location, or you let the phone use your location service for where you are or where you're going to go and travel, and it will give you a list of all of the vegan restaurants in the area, all of the restaurants with vegetarian options and vegan options, and any health food store or supermarket chain.
And you can pick by cuisine as well, can't you?
Totally, you can choose, whether you want American style food or pasta or whatever, and it'll give you a list of everywhere that you can eat, and that's been like super crucial for me.
Yeah, because if you're in just like, obviously if you're in, say, Berlin, like if you've been to Berlin enough times to know that there's plenty of vegan food around, you just got to look for it. But if you're in some like random town where you've never been before, maybe you're in Wagga Wagga or something, like, and you can just get on Happy Cow and one little thing pops up a kilometre away, and there you go, you got some food.
Yeah, so that's definitely a very important tool. I would recommend to any vegans out there that are doing some traveling. Maybe you're going on a European backpacking trip or whatever, trip to the US, to Disneyland. Like, get that app or that website, and you will find vegan food anywhere near you.
Awesome. So another thing I wanted to talk about is, you did a campaign you've done a few campaigns for Peta, right?
Yes, that's right.
But the one I think that got the most attention was the anti-wool campaign. Was that 2014, 2015?
That was, I'm pretty sure that was late 2014.
Okay.
And leading into 2015.
And from what I know, you got quite a bit of backlash from that.
Yeah, lots of backlash on social media.
Tell us how that went down.
Well, first of all, one question a lot of people ask me about PETA and my involvement with them is, like a lot of people they like to form their own opinions about PETA and other similar groups, and that's fine. Like,
don't have to agree with everything everybody
exactly.
does.
Do your research, read up. If you don't like something about it, that's fine. The reason that I choose to work with PETA is that I believe that my end goal and PETA's end goal is pretty much the same. We want to introduce the vegan lifestyle to as many people as we can, because we feel that it is a fantastic lifestyle. There's a great sense of community. It's super healthy. It's beneficial to the environment. And of course, the most important reason is it's the most ethical lifestyle choice we can live. And that's what I want for people, because it's been so great for me and so great for you. So I really want to share that. And PETA has this like vast reach, with all of their different campaigns they do. And
I think they're one of the biggest like animal rights groups.
Definitely, they're the biggest in the US. And so I choose to align myself with them occasionally on campaigns that I feel passionate about, because I think that their resources can help me get my message to a broader reach, So bear that in mind before we continue the conversation.
Yeah, I definitely use a little bit of PETA stuff just on my Vegan Alliance page. Some of the stuff they do, like it's like any animal rights group. Not everything they do, I always think, I could have done that better.
You're not going to agree with everyone all the time, basically.
But if your end goal's the same, that's all that really matters. You don't have to 100% agree with the way they're approaching everything. But yeah, so what we wanted to talk about was like obviously you told me there was quite a bit of backlash from that campaign, and what actually happened with that? Like, what sort of backlash did you get?
Yeah, so we did this campaign. My part was basically just a photo shoot. I posed with a foam prop of an injured sheep, or a lamb rather, and that in itself gave the Australian and US farming communities a lot of ammo, because they thought that we were trying to trick people into thinking that this prop was a real lamb, and trying to make people think that the way the lamb was injured was realistic with what happens in the wool industry, which I'll get to it later on, but it kind of is. But anyway, as a vegan, I would never use an injured animal for a photo shoot. I would try and rescue an injured animal, but a lot of people said, why are you using this fake sheep? Like, that's so fake. Well, we're not going to go out and find someone that's beating up a sheep and then steal the sheep and then quickly schedule in a photo shoot.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. We use the prop because it's cruelty-free and it gets a message across. And a few people had pointed out that sheep in the wool industry wouldn't appear like that sheep did. It looks like it's had like large patches of wool torn off its body, basically. It's
quite bloody.
It's quite bloody. It's quite a brutal image. But upon further research and upon them showing me a lot of their investigation footage, there was a lot of sheep that actually did look like that lamb. And there was sheep that had been cut open from sort of shearing rush jobs. Shearers are getting a little bit rough and accidentally cutting the sheep, and then when they do that, they have to quickly stitch up the sheep because they can't just leave an open wound.
Right.
So they're stitching up these sheep with needle and thread with no painkillers whatsoever. And you can Google it yourself. You can go on there and Google like animal cruelty wool industry, and you will see sheep with huge bloody patches of wool.
Yeah, and obviously it's not their goal to cut the sheep, but the amount of, they're trying to do everything as efficiently as possible. There's going to be injuries, and they don't necessarily care that there's injuries.
Right. They're just about being efficient and working as quickly as possible. So that's my little answer to those people. But basically, the farming communities banded together and they said, yeah, there is some cruelty that occurs, and we admit that, but they felt like PETA was condemning the entire industry and basically pointing the finger at everyone and saying, you're all guilty of this. And now that's where it kind of gets a bit of a grey area, because as vegans, we believe that animals are not ours to exploit, So yes, Australian, US farming community, you are all exploiting animals to get the wool.
If you're profiting from them, you're exploiting.
You might not be kicking and punching a sheep in the face. You might not be cutting it open with your shearers. You might not even be mulesing the sheep, which is where they cut a patch of skin off the back sides of the lambs so that they don't get fly blown, which there are alternative methods to. what you might not be doing that, but at the end of the day, you're exploiting an animal, and there is a level of cruelty to that. Even with transportation in heat, and you and I have been on a hot Aussie summer's day, you know, and some of these sheep are sitting in the back of a truck with a full wool coat, traveling for hours with no water,
standing in feces and with no food or water.
Exactly. If I do that to any person, that is going to be condemned like
you'd be on the
total
news.
Cruelty. So that's what we believe. We were just highlighting specific, really brutal acts of cruelty that were found in numerous shearing sheds all across 3 states of Australia. They were all random visits by undercover investigators. And at every single location, they found really poor cases of terrible abuse.
So that's obviously, out of the 3 that they picked, if they're all doing it, how many? I mean, obviously, it sounds like the majority are having these problems.
That's right. So the campaign was to highlight that, and we used video footage, and I was describing, some of the occurrences that occur throughout the footage. And the farming community just basically fought back as hard as they could, and it got very personal. I had, for about 3 months, I could barely get on my Twitter or my Facebook account. Actually, I deactivated my Facebook account at the time for unrelated reasons, but I didn't realize that I had accidentally reactivated it, and I went on there one day trying to check something out, and it was just like brutality throughout my whole feed.
Wow.
But I was getting death threats from Australian farmers and relatives of farmers and just sympathizers of the wool industry in general. Death threats, being called horrible abusive names, and all because I want animals to stop being harmed.
Exactly. As soon as you challenge someone's livelihood, and whether that, that they don't really understand that they're like I guess they understand their livelihood exploits and harms animals, but like when it comes down to money, they don't really care.
Yeah, and it's considered normal to these people.
It is normal, and they just can't see it from the same perspective that we see it. Like, I think an outsider has a really good perspective on what's right and wrong, I think. Whereas if you're just brought up in that kind of environment and never taught any differently, it comes down to that whole thing where, like people who, loved ones that we have who, eat meat and eggs and dairy and all that kind of stuff. Like if they've never really thought about the animal rights thing, it's kind of sometimes hard to condemn them until they know. Yeah. And I think sometimes these people don't know, and it's so hard to get through to someone who's been brought up a certain way for their entire life.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, that was an interesting time in my life, but it didn't deter me from fighting for what I believe in. And I had, as I said, my Twitter was a nightmare. Luckily I was in the US at the time for work. I was touring a lot in the US around that time. So I didn't, have any in-person altercations with anyone or anything like that. I was lucky in that way. But, I had the former Minister of Agriculture, Barnaby Joyce, on national TV.
Oh, everyone loves him.
Basically calling me out.
Personally?
Personally, yeah. Called me out by name and basically said I don't know what I'm talking about and that I'm off, in California living in my own vegan splendor. But I think that the campaign to draw such a serious reaction from like the head of the entire Australian agricultural, industry and community means that we're pushing buttons and we're getting the message out there. And for them to even take notice of that, it means that we're doing something right.
Yeah, I think that, like, I've noticed that, I've mentioned this in a few of my posts recently and on the last episode of the podcast, is a lot of companies or, places like KFC or dairy companies like milk companies and whatever, they are they're nearly retaliating using their advertising now by kind of retaliating to kind of vegans. Like, I've noticed a few things, like on a KFC ad it said bacon, which is a common term that people use to give vegans a hard time on social media.
Yeah.
Other things like a dairy ad saying there is no alternative, like basically saying all these alternative milks, which sales have skyrocketed worldwide, of almond milks and oat milks and all these kind of things. Like, they obviously know that, so it's kind of cool that they're using these things because they're recognizing that we're a threat. Yeah. So I think it's kind of cool that someone like Barnaby Joyce would actually give you any airtime because, I mean, as he said, he's the head of this whole debacle.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that he's, your names come out of his mouth because of something that you did, and they understand that you've threatened them.
Yeah, and it was such a big deal at the time too. I even got calls from newspapers and a couple of TV shows. The panel wanted me on to come on air, but I was in America at the time working, and so I said I could potentially phone in, but I referred to my contacts at Peta, and they said, we feel like something like that could be a bit of a setup.
Mm-hmm.
And so they ended up putting their person in charge of kind of media and relations and publicity and everything. They contacted the TV show, and she went on there. Her name's Claire Fryer.
Uh-huh.
And it totally was a setup. She had this entire panel of people ready to give her a piece of their mind, and that could have been me. And I'm not media trained. I'm just a guy that wants people to stop being mean to animals.
I know, and it's got to be hard because it is one of those things. Because even though you can have all the knowledge in the world, sometimes when you put on the spot and attacked by 5 people at once, personally, it can be very hard to give the right comebacks, off the top of your head.
Yeah.
And you want someone that is trained in that because you don't want it to come off like you don't know what you're talking about, whereas you do.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate that that was the media's reaction a lot of the time, but as I said, we're getting the message out there, and for them to even respond is just
shows that they paid attention.
That's right.
Okay, so there's probably a little bit more of a sort of harder question is how do you feel like when you got friends and family who are nice, kind, compassionate people, might not necessarily be vegans, but do you think that can someone be truly a good person if they know the truth, so they know exactly what happens to animals, they've seen all the stuff, they've talked to you about it, but they just choose to ignore the facts and keep doing what they're doing, so essentially they're still contributing to harming animals? Do you think that person can truly be a good, compassionate, kind person if they're just ignoring the suffering of sentient beings? And I know it's a hard one because we're talking about mums and dads and
people we care about.
I don't hate my mum and dad and my brother, and this is something I think all vegans probably struggle with who have beautiful families. But it's very hard to watch your families contribute to this stuff when you know the truth.
Yeah, look, it is a really hard question, and it's probably one that I ask myself all the time, and I struggle with it personally because a lot of my close friends and family don't live the way I do, and unfortunately, in the society we live in, that's okay. They can do whatever they want, essentially. There are only so many rules that they could, and laws that they could break that would actually get them in trouble, but just, general animal abuse and animal slaughter and animal cruelty, for the most part, is deemed legal and okay by society standards. So that's a hard question to ask. If you ask someone if they think they're a good person and they abide by all the laws and they don't really think that they're hurting anyone or doing anything out of the ordinary because
that's how they've been brought up.
Because animal slaughter is considered ordinary, then they're going to think they're a good person. And I think a lot of these people are good people. They just haven't quite made that connection yet, There's a thing called cognitive dissonance where it's a conflict of ideals within you, and you were raised one way, but then someone gives you this information that should make you think the opposite way, but you've lived that one way for so long.
It's too hard to comprehend.
Your brain figures out a way to kind of block out some of the stuff and be okay with what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really hard to kind of help these people and get that message through to them that, you've got this core belief that we should be good, kind people, but you're contributing to something that is essentially cruel and not good and not kind. Mm-hmm. What we, as your loved ones, want to do, you, Luke, and me, Jonah, we want to try and help you realize that so that you can be more at peace with yourself.
Yeah.
And create peace around you, And
I think that's where sometimes people mistake, things that we say, because, sometimes you'll say something which is a brutal, it's a cold, hard facts. Sometimes I post a lot of that stuff on my personal and the Vegan Alliance Instagrams and Facebook. And, I do get a lot of backlash and a lot of friends and family. Sometimes I feel like, I feel a little bit distanced from people who I care about because I'm kind of worried that they think that I'm judging them.
Yeah.
But I like to share the truth, and it can come across as though, like, if you don't do it this way, you're wrong. But I totally get that people are raised a certain way, and I totally understand that it's very hard to, it can be hard to make that connection if you've never been taught it before. Yeah. And I think it's, I personally, like, my answer to this question would be, like, I don't think people who aren't vegan, people who aren't vegan can be good people. But I think that people like you and me who already know the truth, we need to keep sharing this information as brutal as it can be, just to help people make that connection over and over again. It needs to be shared, everything. They need to see everything and understand everything. And that's why I like to share it in the most honest way possible. And that can create a little bit of distance between me and people I know, because people can feel a little bit awkward around me at times because, I guess I'm challenging everything that they know. But I really think that if someone is a good person and a kind-hearted person, once they can make that connection to animals, it can tip them over the edge to turn to a vegan lifestyle.
Yeah, look, one thing I've learned over I'll be vegan for 17 years in a couple of days, which is a long time, and it's been a journey, and I've learned a lot about myself, and I've learned a lot about other people in that time. And one thing I've learned is that everybody's kind of on their own path, they're on their own journey, and you and I have seen the light, so to speak, when it comes to this lifestyle that we live. And if it were up to us, we'd flick a switch and everybody would change
to a vegan
and be
lifestyle.
kinder and be nicer and be vegan and, want to live cruelty free and help the environment and recycle more and everything. It's so vast. It's even beyond just giving up eating animals, you know what I mean? If we could do that, we would. And that's why sometimes I'm sure other people get frustrated with our efforts and the things we post on social media and the things that come up in conversation, and even just the way we confront people in conversation. I get it on both sides, but everyone's on their own path. And I've seen people who have said to me, 10 years ago, I will never give up meat. They were raised in a country town and they were raised on farms, and they've said, nope, this is my life, this is normal, this is how I was raised, I will never give up meat. And then fast forward 10 years later and that person's vegan.
Yeah.
And, it might take someone 6 months. It might take someone 10 years. You just don't know. And I think that's why it's so important that people like us and all of our friends and peers and fellow vegan activists, animal rights activists, we just got to continue doing what we're doing, because you never know. Like, you might have someone that's giving you so much resistance and they just argue with you tooth and nail and fight against you and comment all the stupid things on your Facebook post or whatever. But you might have struck a chord with that person and you won't know. Neither of you will know. And maybe 4 years later, that person... This has personally happened to me numerous times. I've had old friends and colleagues and just people I didn't even really know that well reach out to me years later and say, hey, this is kind of random and out of the blue, but like a few years ago, we talked about veganism and like we argued and I didn't think you were right. And you said some pretty intriguing stuff. And it got me thinking, and now like 4 years later, I'm actually vegetarian trying to go vegan, or I've just gone vegan, and I just want to thank you for like opening my eyes. And
you essentially planted a seed, but it took a while for it to blossom.
Right. Some seeds are going to take longer than others to take root and grow.
Yeah, exactly. So really, I think like it can be difficult, because you don't want to alienate people, you don't want to make people feel awkward, but you and me both know that there's a lot of horrible stuff happening, and like the stuff we're sharing isn't just like our opinion, it's real stuff. It's and I know for a fact there's times in the past where I can come off a little bit like maybe too aggressive, but I've explained that in previous episodes of the podcast. Is sometimes I'll be up at Freedom Hill and I'll be playing with the animals and have a nice time with them. Then I come back down the freeway and I see like 6 different animal trucks with animals shoved in there and their heads hanging out the side of the truck. And I just become furious, and sometimes, which is, I might make a post in that period of anger, and it comes across as like too aggressive. And I understand that sometimes the aggressive nature of like Instagram and Facebook posts doesn't always help, but at the same time, a lot of people, I get contacted by a lot of people people give me a hard time, but also a lot of people saying, hey, thanks so much for posting this. This has really helped me. And a lot of people who were like hard out meat eaters have actually stuck up for me on posts before, where someone will be saying, I think what you're doing is detrimental to the cause. And someone who I know used to be a meat eater 6 months ago saying, actually, the stuff that Luke posted and the stuff that he says has actually resonated with me, and now I'm actually thinking about going vegan. So it is hard. I think we need all types of activists. We need the people who are a bit more passive, the people who are a little bit more aggressive. A good mix does help, and I don't think there's any right or wrong way to do it. I just feel like you just need to be doing something.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I've learned over a long period of time kind of how to read different situations, different, social situations, online situations, and kind of, in a way, like pick my method of approaching a subject. Sometimes it might be to, tell someone about an awesome restaurant or share a photo of a great meal you've had, and that could have enough of an impact on that person that they want to try this food because it looks great, or you've said it's great, and then that might get the ball rolling in that way. Uh-huh. Maybe someone doesn't care about that stuff. They don't care about food, or they just want to eat, Whoppers all day or whatever. But maybe that person needs to see like a video of like horrendous cruelty that occurs every single day in our lives, in reality, for them to go, holy shit, this is happening right now and I'm contributing to it. I don't want to do that anymore.
And I totally understand, like, I probably post like weekly, I post like pretty graphic stuff and like pretty hard stuff for people to absorb. But the way I see it is that every day, like, my social media profile is growing, so I'm getting new followers. And I sort of think, even if I just, if I post graphic videos and people have seen them before, they can just flick through. They don't need to look at them. They know what I'm about. They follow me for a reason. But people who are new, who may have not seen all this stuff, and I watch this Vegan Alliance thing about, click on it, they watch like 2 seconds of the video and like some brutal thing happening to a pig. Even if they don't watch the whole thing, just seeing that little thing and maybe a little caption saying, keep ham off your plate or something like that, even if it takes 4 years, like you were saying, that happens with some of your friends, even if it takes years for that little seed to blossom, that little seed gets planted and gets them thinking about, perhaps the next time they're eating ham, maybe that happened to this pig, like maybe I don't want to contribute to that. And so that's why I'm so relentless in posting stuff, because I just wanted to constantly be there to remind people, to let them know that this stuff is happening always, and billions and billions of animals are dying every year. It is such a massive, like, it's death on a massive scale. It's bigger than any, human like loss of life. And people don't like it when you say that, especially when animal rights gets compared to like the Holocaust. I mean, and that's, from my perspective, that's not playing down the Holocaust of the Jews. I mean, that was a horrible time in history, and I don't want to play that down at all, because it was horrible for the families and all the people involved. But if you look at the term Holocaust, it is the mass loss of life by genocide or whatever other means. But it is relative to what's happening to the animals, and it's such a huge. There's so much death going on, and it's happening all around you all the time. And I think people really need to realize it. So I think. That's what I was going to ask. Do you think you've ever heard a valid argument from anyone against veganism? Because in my personal opinion, most people who argue on any of my social media or with me normally give me pretty unreasonable, uneducated responses. I don't normally engage in good conversation with people, which I would like to, about why they think they should be able to eat meat and why it's healthy for them, why it's good for the planet. I personally haven't heard a good argument against veganism, but have you?
I've heard them all, pretty much. In 17 years, I've heard a lot of different arguments, and I think some are definitely more valid than others, but not necessarily to the point where it might win an argument. And I'm a very stubborn person, so it's going to be hard to win an argument with me. But I've had people say things like, well, our brains wouldn't have developed the way they did without eating meat. And that might be 100% true, but our brains have developed now, and we're at a point in time where we can choose not to do that anymore. Exactly. We don't need it anymore. We've developed our brains, unless unless we continue to eat meat and our brains are suddenly going to like turn into giant alien brains and we can levitate and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the future of our evolution. I don't know, but I think we're doing pretty good as is. As far as intelligence.
Is not a good idea forever.
So, things like that. And other people have said to me, I think animal cruelty is horrible. I don't like factory farming at all. But I think it's natural for humans to eat meat. Or maybe they have a Bible reason. Their religion says that God says it's okay for them to eat animals. That's what animals were provided for. And that's an argument that they truly believe, even if I don't think that's valid. They think it is, And people who say, I don't want to buy meat from a supermarket that's been factory farmed. If I could hunt my own meat, or some of them do go out hunting, then they do that. And for me, it's always going to come back to, is it a necessity?
Yeah.
Do we
In
absolutely need to do this? And the answer for that is always going to be no.
Yeah.
We just don't need animal products. We don't.
Thousands of years ago, when there were no options, it was like, okay, there's this animal. If we kill it, we're going to eat it and survive today. Mm-hmm. If we don't kill it, we're going to die. So, yeah, okay, thousands of years ago, like maybe that was the smart thing to do. But in 2016, when you can go to the supermarket and you can choose kindness or cruelty, it would make so much more sense if you just chose kindness, because you don't need to choose the cruelty, and you can get everything you need from eating plants and vegetables and grains and all the good vegan stuff. So, yeah, you think that's your answer for that, you think?
Yeah,
yep.
Look, it's just about necessity, and at the end of the day, we don't need it. We don't need it to survive. People want it. People want the flavor of meat.
They crave it or addicted to it.
People want the animal protein for their bodybuilding or whatever. People think that they need it because of what they've been told.
And you can still be a bodybuilder on plants.
People think they need certain animal products because of what they've been told by their doctor or their parents or, the past tradition. But the bottom line is we just don't need it.
Exactly. All right. So we've kind of touched base on this, like your preferred way to educate people. Like, do you think you call yourself an animal rights activist. You do a reasonable amount of stuff to sort of speak out against this kind of stuff reasonably regularly, you'd say?
I do. I consider myself an activist. Some people wouldn't, because a lot of people seem to discount the power of social media in 2016, 2017.
Social media is a form of activism.
Right. And so, I'm lucky that I garnered quite a large following through my music and through, a little bit of modeling and random stuff I've done here and there over the years. I got a pretty good following through a lot of my social media accounts. And as a long-time passionate vegan, I think it's important for me to use that influence for something positive. Mm-hmm. And I think the vegan lifestyle is nothing but positive, And
you have this platform, so you can use it for...
I've been lucky enough to have the platform, and so I'm going to use it. I've had people try and argue with me, saying that I'm just an internet keyboard warrior, and that's not real activism, and that if I really want to be a true vegan, I should be physically out there saving an animal. But that's... Unfortunately, that's not even legal. Like, I can't break into a slaughterhouse and save a cow, because I'll go to jail.
But you can do what you're doing on social media.
Right.
Just to butt in, how many people do you think you may have influenced to go vegan over the years? Like, would it be in the tens or in the hundreds or in the thousands? What do you think? Just as an estimation, just through your social media activism.
I mean, without trying to toot my own horn at all, just based on what feedback I've received, both in person and on, all my channels, from inbox messages or whatever, I would say I get an average of about at least 100 to 200 messages a year from young people, or some old people too, saying something that you posted, something that you said, an interview that you've done, a lyric in your song, whatever it be, something that came from me has influenced them to change their lifestyle because they want to be more cruelty-free.
We're talking in the thousands probably.
So over the years... Yeah, I mean, maybe a couple thousand. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe those people didn't stick. I don't really know. But
they still thought about it because of something you said.
Yeah, I've even had an impact on people that still eat meat, but they want to help in some way. And, we talked about different people being on their different journeys before. Some of these people are like, you know what? What you said resonated with me, but I'm not quite ready to take that step yet. So I'm just giving up meat 1 or 2 days a week. I've got one of my best friends in the world in California has started eating completely vegan meals 1 day a week. And that to me is a huge step. And that's like,
because they're trying.
That's a stepping stone, and that's, a window into the next step. So yeah, look, I keep doing what I do because I think it's my responsibility to share something positive with the world. And it goes beyond veganism for me personally too. I live a drug-free lifestyle, and as a musician, in a world of musicians that are dying of drug overdoses and, being addicted to drugs and alcohol, I think it's important to share with people, peers, young people around me, some positive things. So even if it's just a simple a message of trying to be kind to your fellow man, or don't abuse your mind and body, don't abuse animals. That's basically what I'm all about when it comes to
so you're definitely
putting myself out there.
So you're definitely using your platform for any kind of positive change. But would you say, like, the way you approach things, do you like? I mean, you obviously see the way that I do it and the way that you do it. Do you think, like, at times you get that kind of you add that kind of aggressive touch to things, like you get mad and you sort of post something that might come off as a little bit more aggressive than other things that you post, or do you generally try to keep things a bit more passive and a little bit more accessible to everybody without sort of stirring the pot too much?
I think, like you said, it can come from a place of emotion, so I might be having a great day, I'm super happy, I'm super positive, I've just eaten a giant stack of vegan pancakes, and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to post a photo of this, and people are going to love it.
Yeah.
And a few people are going to see the vegan hashtag and be like, ugh, that's gay or gross or whatever. We don't like that. But for the most part, it's a good positive thing. And that's a reflection of my day. If I see a horrible video of cruelty and it makes me super mad, I'm going to be like, you know what, I'm going to share this because this pisses me off.
Yeah.
And I don't want people to contribute to this. I want people to be kind. And sometimes it can come from a place of anger. And as you said, anger is still a way to get a response from people. They might see something that makes them angry too, even though they'd never thought about it before. And all of a sudden, they're on the path to being more kind as well. So it all depends. I don't think there's any right and wrong way to go about things. And I think a lot of it's just going to be a matter of opinion. Some people think that sharing photos of vegan food is annoying. That's their opinion.
It works for some people.
Right. Some people think that posting videos of brutal animal cruelty is annoying and they don't want their feed filled with it and they don't want to have to look at it because they don't want to think about that when they're eating their burger or whatever. That's their opinion, So you're never going to please everyone.
But everybody needs something to have that seed planted. And some people, it's going to take the hard truth. Other people, it could literally take a picture of a vegan cupcake. Like, it just, you don't know. Everyone's completely different. So I think what we're saying is that, if you're contributing in some way to spreading the message, that's all you need to do, really, isn't it? It doesn't really matter which way you're doing it. I don't personally think that name calling someone, like, you don't want to go off and say, oh, if you eat meat, you're an absolute asshole. Yeah. I don't think that's going to come off good because it's not really how it is. But if you say, hey, if you're eating meat, you're actually contributing to this, this, and this. Are you okay with that? That's a little bit more brutal than the picture of a vegan cupcake. But at the same time, it's not. It's really just asking the question. Yeah. Because you're sharing the facts.
So, one thing I wanted to mention is this is kind of along the lines of what we're talking about. I've got a really, really close friend of mine in California. And him and I talk a lot about very deep philosophical things, and sometimes it gets too deep, and sometimes we end up arguing. But he's my best friend, and I love him, and he's very different from me, and he's not vegan or anything. But we have great conversation. He challenges me in a lot of ways, intellectually. Anyway, one day I was having a bit of a meltdown over social media, and I was trying to convey to him that I feel like I have this responsibility because I have a following. And because I'm so passionate about veganism, that I need to use my following constantly to spread the vegan message. I still believe that. But I was telling him this, and I said, but sometimes it gets exhausting. Like
It does.
sometimes I get on my Twitter or my Facebook, and there's people arguing, and I lose friends over it, and there's people slandering me, and occasionally I get a death threat, and that doesn't feel great, So I'm telling him, I'm like, sometimes I just want to just delete my social media for a while.
I think everyone feels like that sometimes.
But then, on the other hand, I can't do that because I've got this responsibility. And he said to me, this was really important, and I think everyone, whether you're vegan or not, everybody who has a core belief that everybody should, be kind or spread some kind of positive message needs to hear this. One thing he said to me is that, even if you shut down your Facebook, shut down your Twitter, take a break for a day or a week or a month, the way you live is going to influence other people. It might not be to 20,000 people on Twitter or 30,000 people on Instagram. It might be to somebody who sees you at the supermarket, putting a plastic bottle in a recycle bin instead of in the regular bin, or like throwing it on the street. It might be someone in a restaurant with you who hears you ordering a vegan meal and thinks, oh, what's veganism about? Someone that you don't even know. So there's always going to be this kind of reach and this, I guess, level of activism just by living the way you live and choosing to...
You're not actually directly doing anything. You're just leading by example.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And I think that's something that I really needed to hear, that because it made me feel better and less stressful and like, even when I'm not stressing myself out on social media, I can have a positive impact on other people.
Yeah, because sometimes you do definitely need a break from social media. At times it can just bum you out. I have days where the more I look at it, the more bummed out I get, and I just want to switch off from it. And I do sometimes. Sometimes I'll go a few days of just not looking at it. But at other days I'm really like amped up. Something's happened in the news, or I want to share this or talk about that. But yeah, you definitely need to take a break at times. Otherwise it can just get you down. And you can still be influencing people by just living your day-to-day life. Probably 2 more questions, then I'd say we'd be done.
Hit me. Sorry if this is long and boring.
No, this is good. This is good. Have you ever been deficient in anything, as far as you know?
In anything? Okay, so...
Because that's a big thing, and there's people wanting to switch to veganism, and they're always unsure about how their health's gonna
totally
shape up.
I think it's going to be different for everyone. Like everyone's going to have slightly different nutritional requirements. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people going into veganism may have already been close to or deficient in something when making that change, and then it might get worse because they're not following the right diet or nutrition.
Or eating hot chips and
chocolate, and not eating healthy at all. And then they revert back and they try and blame it on the veganism or going vegetarian or whatever. I'm a really lucky person. I've got a great metabolism. I've never had any kind of issues with weight, anything like that. I was really skinny growing up as a kid, like really, really skinny. And if anything, I put on some weight and muscle mass as a vegan, especially when I started working out and kind of getting more into the nutritional side and making sure I was getting extra protein and eating bigger, healthier meals. But I've never struggled with any health issues.
Don't take too many supplements.
I hadn't had my blood levels checked for I want to say about 15 years while I was vegan. I had them checked once, but the doctor never gave me the results. They just came back and they said, "Yep, you're fine. Everything's fine. You're healthy."
Yep.
And I went, "All right, cool. I'm doing something right." And I'm not the healthiest eater. I definitely eat a lot more healthy lately than I have been. I eat a lot of salads. I eat a lot of bowls with grains and quinoa and lentils. But on the flip side, I love a veggie chicken burger, and I love vegan chocolate, and I have a huge sweet tooth. So I'm by no means the healthiest guy out there, but I did have my blood work checked about 8 months ago from a doctor here in Adelaide, and I specifically told them that I was vegan and that I wanted to check all of my blood levels to do with my diet and my nutrition, and every single thing came back optimal or above. There was a couple of things that I actually was above optimal, and one of those was B12, which seems to be the big thing that everyone's concerned about. And you should be. You should definitely be concerned about your B12 intake, because as a vegan,
it's super important.
It can be difficult to get enough B12 to remain healthy, especially if you're already low and you're not sure about it. But for me personally, I was fine. The only thing the doctor said was that my cholesterol was slightly above normal.
That's what they said to me too. But they said that mine was a genetic.
Right, so that really worried me at first. I was like, I wanted to have these results and be like, I'm the healthiest vegan alive, and I eat like chocolate all the time, you know? That's what I wanted. And they went, but your cholesterol's slightly above normal. And I was like, oh shit, like if I tell people that, they're going to be like, sucked in, you're not a healthy vegan.
Yep.
And then she went on to say, that can easily come about from an excess of eating sugar. So there I am, guilty as charged. And that it can also be genetic. And she said, in your case, it's most likely genetic and you've probably had a little bit too much sugar.
Exactly, that's what they said to me. And I think might be the same for you as well, is the amount I was over was so slight. She goes, it's absolutely nothing to worry about. She goes, it's just not in the optimum range. She said, it's not going to harm you. She said, and my mum's had high cholesterol as a genetic thing, so that's why I've got it as well. Yeah. But she said it's nothing to do with my food intake.
So yeah, luckily my levels are pretty good. As for supplements, I reckon in the 17 years I've been vegan, I've probably taken a B12 supplement in tablet form, I would say one full container over a period of about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
I would only ever take them really occasionally, very nonchalant. I would just be like, oh, I'll pop a B12 just because.
You remember.
And I might not pop another one for another month or something. But
it's hard to remember all these things.
One, if I wasn't getting my appropriate B12 intake, one container of supplements over 17 years would not cut it. So I'm obviously doing something right there. And I'll take a multivitamin if I feel like I'm getting a cold. And since I've been vegan, I feel like I get sick about half to 3/4 as often as I used to before being vegan.
I don't think personally, ever since I've been vegan, I've ever really had a flu or a cold that's ever gone more than a day or two and ever been anything more than a sore throat and a few aches and pains. Whereas I remember as a kid, I'd get a flu and I'd feel wiped out for a whole week.
Yeah.
So I feel like it definitely makes a big difference.
So yeah, having said that about the supplements, that's the only supplements in tablet form I've ever taken. But I do try and keep an eye on things like my omega levels, my omega-3. I believe that flaxseed and flax oil is a good substitute for that. So I actually like to cook with flax a lot. Here in Australia, you can get a thing called LSA. It's linseed and flaxseed is the same thing. So it's a kind of powdered mix of linseed, soy, and almond meal. And every now and then I'll get that and I'll just throw it in anything. If I'm cooking pasta, I'll throw some LSA in there. If I'm making tofu scramble, you can sprinkle it on top. It
doesn't change the flavour a lot.
It's just basically like having some powdered almonds on top or something, And just doing that, I actually use ground flaxseed mixed with a little bit of water and whipped up a little bit. Turns into like a gelatinous, almost like an egg substitute. I use that in baking. I use it when I make pancakes.
Right, so it's pretty versatile.
Yeah, so it's just kind of all about doing your research and finding the little things like that.
And eating a balanced diet, obviously without the meat and dairy and everything, but eating a balanced diet, like a lot of vegans just eat junk food or don't really eat well at all. Whereas, if you have a day, you might be eating like, hot chips and chocolate, and then, the next day you're eating loads of green vegetables and fruits. I mean, there's a good balance there. That's all it needs. You just can't eat one of everything all the time. You need to make sure you're eating a wide range of foods so you're getting everything you need.
Yeah.
Finally, I guess, is just, you got any tips for some people who, just gone vegan, maybe like finding it a little bit difficult, a few words of inspiration, a few things they could check out, or any sort of tips?
Of course, yeah. I like to offer direct sort of correspondence with people through my social media channels. Having said that, I'm not on there 24/7. I'm not kind of like a vegan helpline. So if you do like message me on Twitter or Instagram, I might not see it. I get a ton of comments all the time. I might see it. I might just not have the time to reply. But I really do try and make an effort to reply to people's questions, especially inbox questions.
What's your Instagram handle again?
My Instagram is just my name, @Jona Weinhofen, JonaWeinhofen. I think you can probably write it somewhere. Same as my Twitter. easily find me on Facebook as well. I'm verified on there. So the first thing I usually do is point them to kind of like kit websites, like starter websites. And there's one that I found is pretty good. It might be a little region specific, so it might be a bit tricky with some of the products.
More US based.
It could be, I can't remember from memory, but one is called vegankit.com. I found that one to be pretty good. It has like a pretty good range of resources, everything from recipes to background on nutrition, but also like reasons to go vegan. Might be like some stories about animal cruelty. It's a little bit of everything, and I think a lot of the key animal rights organizations like PETA, Mercy for Animals, Animals Australia here in Oz, definitely, Animal Equality, all of those, you go to any of those sites, Humane Society, they're going to have some kind of information directed towards people wanting to try a vegetarian or a vegan lifestyle. It might be a website link. It might be that they physically mail you a starter kit that's free, you sign up for. That's usually where I start. I tell people that. Sometimes people have specific queries or questions or concerns.
But I guess it's easy to start with the sort of the kits or the websites because they can go and pretty much answer all of the basic questions about becoming a vegan. Why, how.
Another big thing I get a lot from, especially young people. I have a lot of young followers through music. A lot of young people say, Jonah, I really want to go vegetarian or I really want to go vegan, but I'm 16, I'm still in school, I still live at home, and my parents won't let me. They won't let me do it. They don't think it's good for me.
What do you say to them?
And, it's hard because as a person, you're starting to encroach on someone's family values a little bit, but at the end of the day, I think it's important that these young people want to explore the vegan lifestyle. I usually tell those people to really get online, do your research, make sure it's solid from solid sources. A lot of the meat and dairy industry facts and stuff out there are going to be very biased, and likewise, a lot of the vegan content is going to be very biased. So I try and find pretty non-biased, scientifically sound, or like
and there's a lot of good studies
medically
done just
sound
by
studies.
Like Cowspiracy or Forks Over Knives isn't really necessarily done by vegans. It's just done by
they just quote it, right?
Or
so
people interested.
I tell these young people, get online, do as much research as you can, and find out why a vegan lifestyle is important to you. Like, what are the benefits? What are the health benefits? Why is it going to help you? Why is it going to help them? Why is it better for the environment? They might not care that you want to save a cow here or there. They just think it's normal to eat a steak at dinner time. But if you say, well, no, eating red meat, it's carcinogenic and it's going to increase the risk of me getting cancer or heart disease, which is the number 1 and 2 killer in most parts of the world. If you hit them with facts like that, it's going to be harder for them to
shut you down.
And to say no, and it might get them thinking as well.
When you start talking health, everyone cares about each other. They want everyone to be healthy. And when you can give some facts about why it's healthier, maybe that's going to get their attention first rather than talking about the animal rights stuff.
That's it. So, I get it. You live at home, your parents buy all your food, your mum slaves it over the stove cooking your dinner all night, and you turn around and go, I don't want to eat that, it's a dead animal. I understand where they're coming from, but it's about reaching them with the message that's had such an impact on you.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, I think that's about it, unless you got anything else to say, but thanks for joining me and have a safe trip back to the US when you go home next week, is it? Or?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for listening, guys. I know it's been long, but hopefully I've said something that's informative or helps anyone out there in some way.
There's plenty of good info in that chat. Well, thanks again for listening, everybody. Thanks, Jonah, and catch you next time.
Cheers, Luke.